All right, guys, welcome to the 9 o'clock art session. And I got I think probably the most likes of anything I've gotten in a while for this mermaid, which makes me feel happy because this is definitely the way the direction my artwork is going. I have illustrated about 12 books with a couple different publishers and small regional publishers here in Louisiana. And I'm not really that into drawing cute little animals, but it paid the bills and it got my kids some really good Christmas presents for a couple of years in a row, filled in the gaps financially. But one of the things that's happened since I decided to step back from that and when I did the math, it actually aspirations of becoming a children's book illustrator. One job and selling and promoting it is another. And unless you are it's just you. Like, burst in a couple projects just for me. There's no art markets. I'm not making a product, and so I've started being able to do stuff like this, which is definitely where my heart lies. Art. This is for a project that some of you might know about, but it's not quite out in the open yet, so I'm not going to be too vocal about it. If nothing else, love me some mermaids. So let me tell you what TV or on one of my other feeds, or for whatever sadistic reason, to watch my other videos, then you'll see about what my process does, where I follow the kind of illustration school standard, redraw, rework, and then build up from there. So I don't have to draw it more than once. With the added bonus that prints watercolor. If you go back and watch any of my catfish videos from earlier tonight, you can see the process unfolding. And this young lady, this very, very angry young lady, is the result of that process. But everything you're seeing up to the skin tone I just started putting down is a combination of Colorates pencil and ink washes. So what I'll do is use the inherent weirdness of my printer technique combined with Colorates Prismacolor, and I will do the tonal work to do the underpainting, because that's not going to move. You can see these little dots of blue and the shading and stuff. That's not going anywhere. What I'm putting on top right now are layers of watercolor that would reactivate and will reactivate. And some of the ink on the page will reactivate, but once it combines with the acrylic ink, it doesn't move as much. Like once I go through and do my ink washes, it's there. It's there to stay. It's there until you take a blowtorch to the sucker. So I can confidently just come in. And if you're a traditional medium painter, if you use oils or acrylics, then you're familiar with the term glazing. And glazing is basically adding very thin, transparent washes of color over a tonal bed, so to speak. And so you'll be able to see that you can see through the colors that I'm laying down. This isn't Now I might not going to do it tonight because it's a level of refinement that I actually need to like. You can't screw up on. I might come back with some gouache as like, which is an opaque watercolor, which has absolutely saved my life with illustration. I adore it because watercolor was not my first training. I consider myself more of an oil painter. I just have, children. And so getting the easel time to actually sit down and take out my paints and that beautiful long Zen process of spending, I guess my average work day when I was painting in oils was anywhere from 10 to 14 days, 10 to 14 hours straight at the easel with, obvious breaks for human necessity. But you can't do that with kids. Like I can't. Maybe somewhere there are children who are well behaved enough that, mommy can or daddy can sit in front of the easel for 12 hours and nothing explodes or catches fire, or nobody screams or winds up with some sort of contusion. But not my kids, man. So oil doesn't really translate for illustration really well. So once I started doing illustration, I definitely started trying to train myself in watercolor, and it has been a training. Just a quick sort of side note, anybody who's interested in maybe trying out watercolor but has absolutely no idea where to begin, I tell you what I did when I started trying to figure out how to do watercolor. I took my old sketchbooks, the ones that were no longer sacred cows, right? We've all got some sketchbooks that are just, they're so precious, but there should be pictures in your sketchbook that you just don't give a flying fuck about anymore. And I took some of those pictures and I just used them like coloring sheets. Basically, I got some watercolors. I mean, like a Crayola pack from Walmart. Now, yes, I live in a tiny town that does not have, we have to drive about an hour to get to the closest thing to a city, which is still not a very big city. They only have one Sonic. So I don't really have, I'm not hurting for choice when it comes to art supplies, unless it's mail order. And then you're kind of intimidated. You don't know what you're going to get. So I just started with literally just a good set of Crayola kindergarten student watercolors. And I just threw myself in there and I started using my sketches as, like I said, like kind of a giant coloring book. And yes, I very quickly, the next month when I found myself near a art supply store, I did buy a decent watercolor set. But I didn't wait until I had that watercolor set to start, because the technique is going to be similar. There is definitely a difference between my nice, awesome tube watercolors, which is what I'm using right now. I got a set of pans for Christmas, but haven't let myself play with that too much yet. But there is definitely a difference in the quality. I'm not going to lie. It is a big difference, but just to get yourself started, just to get because the technique is basically the same. I mean, you can do some awesome stuff if you know your colors and if you know how to mix it, and you're willing to let yourself play with it. And I can't stress this enough. You have good paper. Don't try to watercolor on printer paper. But if you're just sitting there and contemplating watercolor as a medium, just jump in. And so you can see what happens when I start putting these layers of watercolor on here. I'm keeping all of the tonal variation from the ink washes underneath. I'm keeping all of that grisaille sort of, it's not grisaille, it was a very complicated grisaille. All of the underpainting tonal variation is staying. And it's just these thin washes that are coming in over the top and playing off of that underpainting. And so you can see, you know, that I'm probably going to spend, guys are probably going to see me go all the way through to the end of this painting, but it's because I've spent hours doing the underpainting. And so I'm just kind of coming back on top with the last little bits, you know, and like I said, when in the light of day, I might come back and do a little bit more highlight work, you know, get some white tones up here on, you know, with some gouache with that opaque watercolor. But you can see just how fast. I mean, we've been doing this for what, 10 minutes, and in 10 minutes, it's a completely different painting because I have that underpainting to build from. So ink washes, I use a colored acrylic ink. I like it. I also like, what I usually wind up doing, I have the whole spectrum, but what I usually wind up doing is just mixing my blue and my brown to make a black, because ha 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 ha, that is still drilled into me, as opposed to using the actual just black India ink. The result of which being I have a huge tube of black India ink that I bought when I fell in love with inks that I very, very rarely use. Because I am still just, I like the greater variation that can be had when using the more traditional color palette of inks. My kids are always asking me, what makes gray? I'm like, blue and white. And they're like, why? And I was like, because Gaither told me so, or because Rob told me so, or because David Horton told me so. You know, it's one of those, that is one of those art school truisms that's how you make gray, is blue and white. Although I do have a Payne's gray. I even have it in my watercolor palette that I will tend to use kind of as a shorthand. But when I do mix my burnt umber and my ultramarine, it does tend to be fairly Payne's gray-ish. And so you can see how fast that came together with the colors. Just taking a quick pan across here. Gonna detach you. And so you can see, please forgive the autofocus. Come on, okay. Woo. Get some of that glare. You can see the difference now with the proper underpainting, just a little bit. Just a little bit of watercolor makes all the difference. And I am still live on Facebook, but nobody is watching, so I'm going to end that.